What's up, my fellow rod snobs? Today we have a very special video. We're going to be talking about a rod that a lot of people have and it's been around many years, but I don't think anybody has ever reviewed it or talked about it at length on YouTube. So I'm going to drop today this review on the NRX 873 Carolina rig rod. So I'm going to go over some of the history of NRXs. I'm going to talk about a little about the hype, some of the good, some of the bad, the aftermarket, a lot of thoughts about the NRX line in general, because I've been using NRXs for years. I've had multiple rods coming in and out of my collections. So I do have some experience with them. I own this one currently. I don't have any other ones at the moment. And at the end of the video, I'm going to do a rod action test where I'm going to show this rod's action compared to a regular Shimano Expride medium heavy, because technically this rod is a medium heavy. So if you want to skip towards the bend test, shoot towards the end of the video if you want to just see how this rod, its action compares to other rods that are sort of like it. So anyway, let's jump right in. This video is going to be long because there's a lot to talk about with NRXs, because it's a very hotly spoken about rod. This rod line has been around since 2010. I think Loomis dropped the NRX in 2010. And what's interesting is since 2010, it is now 2020 at the time of making this video, they're basically the same rod. They haven't done very many updates to these things over the years. They have essentially all the same line, all the same models. In fact, they've dropped some models since then and they brought them back, but that's a whole other video. They're very much old school. That's going to be a recurring theme throughout this review, is that Loomis has decided that this is the NRX. They're not going to change it. Everything that was basically designed in 2010 is going to keep going. They haven't messed with the formula. It's all the same, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Now, the good thing is it works. Why mess with a formula that doesn't work? Why mess with a formula that works? These rods sell great. People love them. They have a cult following. People own entire collections of NRXs. It's kind of known as being the top of the mountain for bass fishing rods in general. So why screw with it? The downside is you're still kind of getting 2010 design and technology in these rods, especially with the guides and the reel seat. So it's like they don't want to change, but should they change and update these things? I think they should, but I don't think they ever will. I like to compare the NRX line of rods and Loomis in general with the company Rolex. So if you don't know anything about Rolex, they're a boutique high-end watch company. They are known in the industry as never changing. They have the same designs. They go like entire decades without updating a single line. Like the Rolex Submariner was basically the same watch for many, many years, and then they recently updated it. Everybody freaked out. It's like, oh my God, Rolex is making a change. They finally updated the Submariner. Loomis is the same way. They like to build a rod, build a design, have very few amounts of rod lines and SKUs, and just keep making them over and over and over, and people buy them. So what I'm trying to say is, when you pick up a Loomis NRX out of the store today, you're essentially picking up the same rod that was in the store 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. Not much has changed, and I doubt they're going to change. It's got the same kind of guide wrappings, the same guides, the same reel handle, the same blanks. What's cool about Loomis is you can look, there's videos on YouTube where they do factory tours. Everything is handmade at Loomis's factory. I know they got bought by Shimano many years ago, but it is still all handmade. They hand roll the blanks. They go through the whole process at their factory. So when you look at the price point of an NRX, and we're going to talk more about price because there's some interesting things about the price that most people don't understand. When you're looking at the price and you're looking at like a $600 rod, you're like, why is that so expensive? Well, it's an American-made product made by craftsmen at one factory. It goes from front to, they start out on just sheets of graphite. They roll, form these things, and do everything in-house. So a lot of people's hands touch every single one of these rods. I know there's other companies that do that, but Loomis is kind of like the boutique for this kind of stuff. So let's talk about the rod itself. This is the 873C. All NRXs have an unfinished blank, and that's one of the reasons they're so light. So let's talk about some of the good things about NRX rods in general. They are some of the lightest rods on earth. I don't think there's very many bass rods that are as light as them, and they're light for a few reasons. Number one, unfinished blank, so there's no extra material on this blank that doesn't need to be there, so which really saves on the weight. Number 2, and we're going to talk more about the guides, but this has what's called recoil guides. If you haven't heard of recoil guides, it's because basically nobody's using them anymore except for G Loomis. There's a reason you don't see a whole bunch of rods on the shelf running recoil guides anymore, because these recoil guides were super hot and really fancy and awesome in like 2010. G Loomis is stuck with them. They're still going with them, and it's actually one of the downsides to this rod, in my humble opinion. Also, it's one of the things that gives this rod a unique characteristic. We'll talk about the guides later. But, so the weight, I just want to talk about the weight. So, recoil guides make this rod very light. The construction of the blank makes it very light. No finishing on the rod makes it very light. And then also, what really makes these rods light is the extremely minimalist handle. So if you notice, there's not a lot of material on this handle. You got a butt piece, you got the grip, and then this is all just skeletonized right here. There's no meat in the middle at all. And then there's just a really simple, light locking nut. So your whole grip is basically this chunk. What's cool though is this blank goes all the way down through the handle to the end with no changes in the diameter. So when you put your fingers and your hand on this blank and you're feeling the bites, you're actually touching the spine of the rod. Most companies have a little window where you can kind of feel the blank. This one, you're actually wrapping your fingers around the blank. So that's kind of cool. Also, it's very dated. This is the same basic handle design that this rod has had for 10 years. Is G Loomis ever going to change it? I don't know. People seem to like it. I think it's fine. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, to be perfectly honest, because your hand is literally like just kind of wrapping around the, I don't know. It's not the most ergonomic, I can't say that word. It's not the most hand-friendly reel seat, but it's fine, and it's old school design, and it's going to stay old school. So that's why NRXs are super light. All that combination stuff makes these things stupid light. If you're going to buy one of these, get a high-end magnesium lightweight reel. This is a Metanium MGL. Pick up an Aldebaran, pick up a newer Metanium. There's Lew's Hypermags. Find some super lightweight find some super lightweight reel, stick it on this rod to keep that extreme lightness going. Because when you put a magnesium reel on one of these rods, the whole package is like stupid light. It's really fun to play with. It's really fun to fish. If you put a heavy reel on it, that's fine, but you're kind of ruining the fun of having a ridiculously light rod. Okay, so we talked about the weight. Let's talk about the guides. So, recoil guides. So recoil guides were created by this company. They still make them. This company called REC, R-E-C. REC makes these recoil guides. So the configuration of NRX rods is the first 3 guides are traditional titanium SIC guides. So in 2010, titanium and SIC, this was like top shelf space age shit right here. Okay, now there's Torzite and there's materials that are better, which I actually wish these things would upgrade to Torzite, but for the price they should, but Shimano won't. So you got titanium SIC for the first 3 guides. Then you go to these weird recoil guides that go the rest of the way up the blank up until the tip. So why are there recoil guides, and what are recoil guides? So recoil guides, like I said, it's made by a company called REC. REC licenses to NRX, or licenses these to G Loomis. They have a special version that's black. You can buy these guides. If you're rod builders, you can buy REC recoil guide trains to put on your own rods. Now, okay, there's supposedly some pros with the recoil guides. Number 1, they're light because they have no insert material. So the titanium guides with the SIC insert, so there's a piece of material, the SIC porcelain that's inside the guide, that's a little extra weight. Recoils have no insert. It's just metal loops. It's 2 metal loops just wrapped around. Now, the advantages are it's lighter because there's no inside material. It's one of the reasons NRXs are very light, because they have so many recoil guides. 2, you're supposedly be able to, these always bounce back, they say. So if you step on a, Loomis has always said this in their marketing, oh, you can step on a recoil guide and it'll just spring back to its original form. I don't know who, when they step on a rod, is only stepping on the guide. You're stepping on the whole dang rod if you're stepping on the rod. And if you step on the rod hard enough to bend the recoil guide, you're probably breaking the bank or blank, and you got bigger problems. So I've never understood why the bouncing back to its original shape is something anyone should give a shit about with these rods, with these recoil guides. So The other plus that they say with these guides is that they're extremely sensitive. Because there's no insert, and because it's just metal right to the blank, they're supposedly more sensitive. Now, I don't know how you would measure that. I don't know if you could say, yes, these recoil guides are so much more sensitive than like a SIC titanium or stainless steel with a torzite or whatever other kind of guide material you want to use. I don't know. They say it's more sensitive. These rods are extremely sensitive. I don't even need to go into the sensitivities because if you're watching this video, you know that NRXs are like some of the most sensitive rods on the planet. That's partly because of the blank, and maybe it's because of the recoil guides. I don't know. Problem with the recoil guides. Knots get tangled and smack these things. So if you use leaders, like if you go braid to a leader, you're going to hate NRXs because you're going to hear your knot go thunk, 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 out the guides. They're not that smooth. SIC, the inserts at the top of the blank, or the bottom of the blank, they're smooth. Then it goes into these recoil guides that aren't very smooth, and then it goes out a SIC insert on the front. So if I were to design the NRX rods, a newer version, I would dump the recoil guides. I would go to a full torzite guide train on titanium and just call it a day. They like to stick with these recoil guides. It's a relic. Recoil guides are not hot anymore. Nobody puts them on their rods. Go on the shelf, find another rod out there that has recoil guides. You won't. They're not out there. There's no point to have them. I don't know why Loomis is so pot committed to the recoil guides. I get it. It's a formula they came up with 10 years ago. It still sells. People love it. Why change it? Take it or leave it. Now the fit and finish. Fit and finish on NRX rods are great on the blank, because the blank is pretty smooth, and I mean the blank is pretty awesome. The reel seat's pretty okay. The reel handle, this is custom made. It's not a Fuji thing. Loomis designed this. Now they outsource the guides, the wrapping and attachment of the guides. Loomis actually ships the rods. They outsource it. I don't know where they outsource it to, but when you're shopping for these in the store, line the rod up, look down the barrel of it, and make sure all of the guides are aligned, because I've seen some NRXs in the stores that are not totally aligned. Some of the guides are a little wonky, and if you tell Loomis about this, they basically say, oh, it's within our spec. It's not going to affect the performance. Have a nice day. So if you order one on if you order one online or through the mail and you get it and the guides are not totally right and lined up down the blank, Loomis probably is not going to replace it. That's just their thing. I don't know why, but don't expect perfect guide alignment sometimes on these rods. That's why if you're going to go to the store and pick one out, pick them up, look down the rod line, look down the guide train first, and decide if that's what you're going to, if that's the one you want. Find the best one, essentially. So, I'm kind of going off on a rant a lot about NRXs, but that's why you're watching this video, because you're probably shopping for them, or you own them and you want to learn more. So, they're light. They have recoil guides, which are maybe have pluses, but in my opinion have more minuses, but we're stuck with them. You're never going to not get recoil guides on the NRX, in my opinion. The looks it's just a simple blue tape. Now everyone knows the blue tape is an NRX. It's kind of identifying color now these days. So if you see someone holding one, it's like, oh, they got an NRX. Let's talk about price. Because that's like the biggest talking point with these rods, is everyone's like, oh, they're so expensive. Like Rolex, if you buy one of these on the used aftermarket for like $350, you can use one of these for like 2-3 years, turn around and sell it for $350 if you take good care of it. These things hold their value ridiculously well. And you can typically find these on sale or get a local tackle shop price of anywhere from 20 to 30% off on these. The secret of NRXs is nobody pays retail for these things. Everybody gets a discount. There's tons of margin on these rods for shops to sell them at a discount. So if you walk into your local tackle shop and they got NRXs on the wall and the price tag says $600, walk up to them and say, okay, what's the best price you can give me on this? And they'll usually go maybe 20, 25, sometimes even 30% right down on top of these to walk out the door. Salesmen who work at NRX or G Loomis shops, they get kickbacks from Loomis. So if they sell like 10 NRXs in a year, the shop guys get a free NRX. They have a great program for salespeople, so they're very motivated to sell these rods to you because they get free ones. So when you go into a shop, never pay the full retail price on these. Unless you're at Cabela's or Bass Pro, they're not going to wheel a deal. But go to your local tackle shops, go to your more specialty tackle places, and say, hey, I want a couple of NRXs, give me a great deal. They'll probably knock it down to like $400 or maybe even less for one of these rods. They're going to get their kickbacks, and then you can use these things, take really good care of them, and then sell them for almost close to what you paid for. You're not going to lose much money on NRXs in the aftermarket because these rods have been out for so long. There's almost no differentiation between the years of these rods when they came out. And if you take good care of it, they will hold their value. One of the great things about these, like I think I paid probably about $375, $380 for this rod, and I've taken really good condition of it, or good care of it, and it's in very good condition, I could go around, turn around and sell this rod for $350 like tomorrow. And look, I'm only out $40, and I got to play with this rod for years. So think of him as renting them sometimes. Okay, so the price, we talked about that. We talked about the guys. We talked about the lightness. The cork on these things, G Loomis claims this is like a super premium G Loomis claims this is a super premium cork. In my opinion, it is not, because I still see a lot of filler. I've been using this rod for a little while. I'm already noticing that the filler is starting to show itself. Now, is it soft and is it a nice feeling cork? Yes, absolutely. Is it as good as like a St. Croix Legend Elite or Legend X cork? No, it's not as nice. So Loomis uses, I would say, like a B grade cork on their rods. I wouldn't give it an A. I give it like a B, maybe a B plus. But it is nice. As long as you seal it and clean it, it's going to stay pretty nice. Not a ton of filler, but there is some filler. Still better than Megabass cork, by the way. Also, you're getting a little bit of flourishes on the guide wraps, only up till here. You're getting some thread here, and then they just ditch the thread going up the line. It's not, if you're looking for high-end fit and finish, NRX is not it. These are just straight fishing tools. They're not like flashy rods. They're very, they're very meat and potatoes, but they're very expensive meat and potatoes because of the craftsmanship that goes into the blank. Now, let's talk about this model. This is the 873C. Now, they make G Loomis you got to really research this if you're new to the NRX line, because the way they number their rods, it has to do with the length and the power. So the 873C is a 3-power rod, which is their medium heavy. Now, 873 means it's a 7'3". Now, this is a weird rod because it's a 7'3", 3-power. They have a 893, which is the longer 3-power, and then they have the 853, which is a shorter 3-power. This is in the middle. Why do they have a rod in the middle in the 3-power, but they don't have a rod? They don't have a 7'3" in the 4-power. This rod was designed to be a dragging rod. They call it the CRR, the Carolina Rig Rod. This rod back in the day was designed to be the ultimate like Carolina Rig football jig dragging rod. Why is it called that? Why do they have a rod specifically for dragging or Carolina rigging? I'll tell you. So the regular 3-power rods have an extremely fast tip. So if you pick up an 893C, which is the slightly longer version of this, the 893 has a super fast tip that only bends to about like right here. Okay, it's got a really fast tip. Now the CRR version, the 873, the parabolic bend, I'm saying parabolic with like air quotes because it's not really that parabolic, but it's parabolic for an NRX. For in the NRX line, this is the noodle. Like this is the lighter, more noodly, medium heavy rod, and it's not even that noodly. But for an NRX it is, because NRXs are known for being bottom contact, very stiff jig worm rods. So the action on this rod actually goes down to about here. So I'm going to show you guys in the bend test. It's not going to make much sense now, but most NRXs, especially the 893, the action, the bend is going to stop up here in the tip and kick into the blank, where on the 873 it's going to go down a few more guides. So this is a little more parabolic than the other ones. What is this rod good at? Personally, I throw football jigs with this rod. It's really fun to drag with. Also, this is probably, in my opinion, one of the NRX's best just straight Texas rig rods. A lot of people use this rod for Texas rigging, for football head jigs, obviously for Carolina rigs. This rod can be used for just straight throwing jigs. You can throw 3/8 up to a half. This rod is rated up to 3/4, so you could throw 3/8 jigs, half, and 5/8 on this if you want. A lot of people say that the 873 is like the best all-around NRX rod. If you're just going to buy one, get the 873 because it can drag and do bottom contact, and it can Texas rig, and you can pitch jigs with it. So it's kind of like a rod that is a little stiffer than the 850. These numbers are so hard. The 850, the 853, and the 893. This guy is actually a little stiffer. A little stiffer action, but more parabolic. It's kind of like a medium heavy plus. It's definitely the oddball in the NRX lineup. So I would say if you pick up an 893 and then you pick up this 873, this thing is going to feel a little stiffer than the 893, but it's going to have a slightly more parabolic bend, slightly, than the other rods in the line. I know that sounds really confusing, but it is when you're shopping for NRXs. You're going, oh, do I get the 893? Do I get the 894? Do I get the 873? And then most NRX guys just go, get them all, because you're going to find uses for them. But if you had to just pick up one to start with, I would really consider this 873 because it's like a medium heavy plus. It's got a little bit more of a parabolic bend, so it can do dragging techniques. And I'd say it's probably one of the most versatile rods in the NRX bait casting line. It's definitely one to check out. I know a lot of people who have these don't sell them. You don't see these come up very often in the aftermarket because people love these things. It's a really hard rod to get rid of once you start using it. I know people that actually throw bigger swim baits on this, like 3/8 or ½ ounce paddle tail swim baits, like fishing deep with these things. You can do that with this. This could be a pretty awesome spinnerbait rod if you want to. You could buzzbait with this. Swim jigs. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do with this rod. It's super versatile. So I've talked forever. I think I've gone over all the things I want to talk about in the NRX line. Obviously, these things have a lifetime warranty. Loomis has one of the best warranties in the business. So if you break or have any problems with this, even if you buy these in the aftermarket, Loomis will warranty them. So I think the key things you got to remember is these are 10-year-old rods. 10-year-old technology or design. I'm sorry, not 10-year-old technology, but 10-year-old design elements. You're getting a very skeletonized, no frills rod. You're getting pretty good cork. You're getting a fantastic warranty. You're getting excellent resale value. You're getting good weight. However, the balance on NRXs are not great. A lot of people complain that these rods are so light, but they're not balanced very well. Loomis says because of the recoil guides, oh, the balance is amazing. But in reality, especially the 890 series, so 893, 894s, the longer Loomis rods, they're actually pretty tip heavy. Even though they're like some of the lightest rods on the market, they're still tip heavy. They still kind of tend to lean down when you hold the rod in your hand with your wrist. So something to take note of. If you don't like tip heavy rods, NRXs, especially the longer ones, might not be your cup of tea, but you might have to put a slightly heavier reel on the rod to counterbalance it. So, but in my opinion, this 873 with the Metanium reel, I think it's great. I don't think it's all that. It's a little tip heavy, but not that. I'm not going to nitpick on it. It feels really good. I like throwing football jigs with this rod. It's a really fun rod to use. And you know what? If I don't like it or I want to get rid of it in a few years, I'm not going to lose any money on it because NRXs hold their value like a Rolex dive watch. So anyway, we're going to go over to the bend test now. If you have any questions about NRX rods, please ask them in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe because I got more fancy rod reviews coming out soon. Thank you for watching. All right, so we're going to do the bend test real quick. In my right hand is the 7.2 medium heavy Shimano Expride, which I consider as like the perfect example of a 7-foot medium heavy rod. And in my left hand is the NRX 873 CRR. So we're going to do the bend test on this, and you're going to see quickly that the NRX 873 is basically a little more powerful than a medium heavy. So if you notice the Shimano is dropping way lower, that means it has a softer, more parabolic action than the 873. Now the 873, I actually would consider it to be a medium heavy plus bordering on heavy. It's not as heavy as a heavy as far as like the NRX line is concerned, but it's definitely stiffer than a regular 3 power. So it's, like I said, it's the oddball in the 3-power lineup of NRX rods. Now, one thing, I'm going to put this down because that's pretty obvious. I'm going to put the Expride down. One thing I want to talk about though is why this is considered a dragging rod and why this is a more parabolic rod than the other NRX rods. So when you do the bend, the action on this rod, the backbone kicks in about the 7th guide down. So the backbone kicks in about here on the 873. Now when you pick up like an 893 or an 894, the action, the backbone kicks in way higher on the blank. It's like up towards the tip. So it's a really, really fast tip on like an 893 or an 894. But when you pick up the CRR rod, the action, the parabolic bend goes further down the blank. So you can load up a lot more. That's why people like dragging football jigs with this rod, Carolina rigs, even throwing like some like paddle tail swim baits. So this rod does give you more parabolic action for an NRX. We got to keep using that asterisk. For the NRX line, this is the noodle, even though it's not really a noodle. But it's a really versatile stick, and if you made it to the end of this video, I congratulate you. You must really, really like to hear someone ramble on and on about high-end rods. That's all I really want to say on this one in particular. If you have more questions, ask in the comments. We'll see you on the next one.